Welcome to Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I'm a board-certified music therapist, author, and expert on how to use music to relieve stress fast. This podcast is sponsored by McConnell Music Therapy Services, Inc., where they believe in the power of music to transform people and communities. Based in Northern California, their board-certified music therapists support people of all ages and abilities within hospitals, schools, corporations, and communities using music experience to connect, express, and de-stress. Visit them at mcconnellmts.com or their Facebook page, McConnell Music Therapy. This episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold is also sponsored by Dr. Nisi, trainer and certifier of master and executive coaches, because she believes every person, every relationship, every business, and your finances should be extraordinary. Find out more about Dr. Nisi Moore and the Life Coaching Institute at www.drnisi.com. That's DRNEECIE.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. It's so great to be with you, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm really excited to bring you this fascinating interview with composer and technologist Aaron Labbé. Aaron is the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of LUCID, a company applying music to health and wellness outcomes through neuroscience and AI. Aaron is also an award-winning musician and artist. Aaron started LUCID through a personal call to action after challenging experiences with the mental health system. He transformed his personal passion for music and his belief in its therapeutic potential into an award-winning company at the forefront of the digital health and music space. Since then, LUCID has received the 2019 Best Startup Award at California Music Tech and the Best Use of Tech Award by Next Canada. In the interview, we discuss Aaron's breakthrough technology that brings a whole new level of therapeutic power to your phone. I'm also excited to announce that this is the first episode that we're posting on my YouTube channel as well, because Aaron's technology needs to be seen as well as heard. It's that cool. My apologies along the way if while you're simply listening to the audio version of this interview, you feel maybe a little left out of the conversation. I was so busy geeking out in screen share mode, showing off some of the cool videos and visuals, that I forgot in that moment how to describe what I was seeing to you, my dear podcast listener. So head over to my YouTube channel to see what all the fuss is about in the video. It's just Tim Ringgold. And I'll tell you what, I'll hook you up for doing so. If you head over to the channel and, of course, like and subscribe, and then tell me the name of the band poster behind Aaron in the interview, I'll send you a copy of my ebook, Sonic Recovery: Harness the Power of Music to Stay Sober, for free. And I'll also pick 3 of you and send a signed paperback version of the book as well. You can just email your answer to the Easter egg or to office@timringgold.com. So sit back, relax, enjoy this inspiring story and new technology, and I'll see you on the other side. Aaron Labbé, it is so great to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate that. It's great to be here. My origin story with music. So actually, it's funny. About a month ago, I celebrated 20 years of being a musician.
Nice.
I like to keep track of that milestone. It's kind of a geeky thing that I think a lot of musicians do, but and I'm also celebrating my 30th birthday in about a month or so. So officially, I've been a musician for a majority of my life, right? Yes. 2/3 of my life, I've been playing music, experiencing music, pretty much being completely obsessed and enthralled with the experience. It's funny that, over the last, it's only been a couple of years that I've decided to use the healing properties that I've experienced with music and kind of channel that to give to other people, right? I definitely experienced the therapeutic impacts of music my entire life. It wasn't until, a major crisis and a complete and utter breakdown that I decided that I wanted to make my life about, one, fixing the mental health system. I think that's one thing that I'm very passionate about, is kind of disrupting that space, because I think it needs a lot of disruption. But two, using this beautiful thing that has been such a powerful force in my life to like give back a little bit, right? And kind of push that outward, and make it less about kind of my personal journey or my very almost like intimate relationship with music, and almost exposing that to the world, right? Which is something that I would say that's kind of what it feels like, right? It's almost like, something that works for me. I'm trying to kind of like put a magnifying glass on that and make that available to as many people as possible. So, kind of the journey to it, it's interesting that I think my path with music almost in some cases has caused some of the challenges that I've faced in my life. So for an example, in 2009, I started my music conservatory education at the State University of New York in Fredonia. And for those of us who've been to a conservatory know it's an extremely stressful experience, right? Yeah. Okay. So you know what I'm talking about. I mean,
yes, I do.
Like one of the things that they do, I mean, for those of you who aren't familiar, is they have these things called juries every year where you basically have to re-audition to just stay. So like you already auditioned to get to the school, but now every year you have to basically prove that you're allowed to stay, there. There's this very kind of like, high class like thing of like, well, it's a privilege to be here, so you need to kind of prove yourself, right? And like the emotional abuse that like the teachers will put you through sometimes, it's a lot, right? But at the same time, obviously we're also obsessed, we're like happy to do it, right? And like we're eating, bleeding, crying music, and that's like our entire existence for a few years, right? So I mean, obviously I have a number of predisposed mental health challenges that I've had to face, but that didn't help, right? It was just like it was one of those things that like really didn't help the situation. So I'd say kind of the big genesis for LUCID and for my pathway in terms of using music to try to help people heal was 3 years into my music education at the music conservatory. Obviously, I was around 9 years old when I first started playing. Really, the entirety of my music education until this point has been just to get to music school, like get good enough to be able to get into these halls, right? And now when I was there, I was like, okay, well, what do I want to do with this? It's like, okay, I personally was really into composition. So I studied composition. I was into production. I studied acoustics. I did all the different bells and whistles that I was interested in. But 3 years into my education, I had a nervous breakdown. I had an undiagnosed case of bipolar disorder that I just, was unfortunately just nobody caught, right? It was just one of those things that, I mean, a lot of people who are bipolar experience this, but when you're in a manic state, you're just on top of the world and you're thriving, really. I mean, I was killing it in school. I was killing it in my music practice. I was doing really, really, really well, but turns out I was kind of in this manic state for a lot of that time period. And then I would have these depressive lows that I couldn't explain, right? Like I was like, almost, I used to call myself useless to the world. I was very, I couldn't practice. I couldn't do anything. And it really didn't, at the time, like it just really didn't seem to be mental health. It's also there's a lot more stigma back then too. I was like, I'm not sick, I'm fine. Like there's nothing wrong. Like I'm right. I'm just a student, I'm stressed, whatever. Right. Well, that caught up with me, right? In 2012, I had a near-death experience. I basically had a panic attack so severe that it triggered a dormant heart challenge that I hadn't really known about. Had a heart arrhythmia, basically, that got out of control, and I ended up in the ER and in critical care for about a week in the ICU. And the funny thing is, again, like probably just again, lack of self-awareness. But I didn't, when they asked me like, oh, do you have any history of mental health? I said, no. Right. I was like, I'm fine. I just had I had a heart problem, I guess. Right. But they really couldn't figure out the source of that arrhythmia. Like they're like, well, like we can see the heart issue here and we can help you with that. But like what triggered that is what is concerning, right? It's like, why did you just freak out all of a sudden? Like what happened, right? And again, I was kind of struggling with this, and the doctor, I think, wasn't a psychiatrist by any means, so he just prescribed me Zoloft. Was like, okay, you're probably just anxious. Here's some Zoloft, right? Well, the drug combination of Zoloft when you're bipolar and you're not taking a mood stabilizer just does not go in the right direction. So that literally slingshotted me into hyperspace, if you will, just like the mania of all manias. And it's funny, like in the years that passed, I dabbled with a lot of recreational drugs, but like nothing has ever made me so high as like Zoloft when I was unmedicated. It was just like,
I completely agree. Yeah. And I just have to interrupt you to tell you I had the exact same experience.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was prescribed Zoloft for
Yeah.
depression, and I didn't have depression.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I went on a rocket ship.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like nothing else, right? I
Yep.
mean, and I think, you know, that's one of the things that I one of the reasons why I drive myself to do the work that we do at Lucid. I mean, there's got to be a better standard of care for people like that, but that's a whole other conversation, right? But
yes,
you know, unfortunately, I went 6 months or so without realizing that I was in a bad way, and I kind of dipped into psychosis. Basically, I was getting into a very dangerous spot. The boundaries of reality really blurred. I no longer had a grip on the world as we knew it, and I was basically a ghost, right? Like nobody knew where I was. You know what I mean? Like even to this day, like it's all fuzzy, really.
Wow.
Like where I went, what I was doing. Really kind of scary, right? And eventually my father, who I would say like very comfortably I could say he saved my life in the sense like kind of came down, found me, brought me to the hospital, and I was checked into the psych ward for a couple of weeks.
Gotcha.
And then that was when they were like, okay, I think you're bipolar. Here's a new cocktail of medication. And, you know, after about 3 weeks or so of proving that it was at a therapeutic dose, they released me, right? And that was, I would say, another key point, right? They released me. There was no outpatient care. It was like, here's a bunch of drugs, exist back in the world, right? And that was really challenging. I felt like I could have used some rehabilitation, really. I'd just spent a couple of months in psychosis. I was completely unaware of like what happened to me, and I was kind of just catapulted in the real world.
Wow.
And that's you know, a couple of years of recovery were caused because of that, and that was, you know, purely just because I just didn't get the support that I needed. So unfortunately, the university kicked me out. I didn't make my jury, my going into my fourth year, and I was no longer able to go back to school. So my father, who again, I'm originally from Canada. I was in the US studying music. Basically, that was the reason why I went to New York. He was like, come back to Canada. Like we have healthcare. We'll get you like proper treatment, whatever, which is great. I mean, I came back here, eventually got into some outpatient care, and kind of slowly but surely climbed the ladder back up. But even then I was being told like, you know, you should probably get used to, you know, this kind of lifestyle of barely coasting, right? Which is another just really awful piece of discourse that the medical model really shoves down people's throats. Sometimes it's like, you're disabled now, and this is what you should be comfortable with, is being disabled. There's nothing wrong with it, but like, you know, this is pretty much all that you're going to be able to accomplish. And obviously, I mean, the whole disability discourse is a whole other thing. But I just didn't feel that way. I was like, I feel like, you know, I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to, you know, work. I wanted to do stuff. Right.
Yes.
And I was being told that was almost like an old version of myself trying to drive myself forward. Right. Which is really damaging. But all the while I was kind of actively practicing music, right? Just like constantly at the piano, constantly playing. And I started to dabble with some kind of newish ways of experiencing music, which was I was layering a lot of like synthesis, you know, with music. Primarily binaural beats was something that I got really into.
Cool.
And like I found that like this mixture of binaural beats and music was like really, really interesting. And especially if you were able to like mask the binaural beats, because like I almost like experiencing binaural beats is like kind of like, you know, drinking cough syrup, right? It's like, you know, it's good for you, but like, it's just like, it's really
not pleasant,
it's wretched tasting,
yeah,
right?
Yes.
So I remember really obsessing over like choosing timbral features in my synthesis work to like cover up some of those frequencies, right?
Got it.
I also started to dabble with like, you know, music selection, really obsessing over like how I feel right now, trying to represent that in music.
Yes.
And almost like use music as a guide to a desirable state, right? As you know, the ISO principle, you know, as I'm sure you're well aware of, right? I didn't really understand the science much at the time, but I felt better when I like played music that was tense when I was feeling tense, and then gradually moved myself to like a mood that I found more desirable. Right?
Yes.
So I remember, you know, being really excited about finding this kind of cool practice that was working for myself. And then that's kind of where it stayed for a while. I despite what everybody had said, I went back to school. I got into Ryerson University in Toronto, and I decided what I wanted to do with my life at that point was do something with music, but in a non-traditional way. I had kind of a bad taste in my mouth with the conservatory experience. I was like, you know what? I want to do music, but like I want to reinvent music. I want to do music technology. I was like really into the tech stuff too. So I was like, I started to get obsessed with AI, and I was like, maybe I can build cool new instruments or something. That was kind of what I was at first, what I wanted to do. I was like, I'll build a new instrument that's like an AI that I can like play with or something, right?
Awesome.
So my first 2 years at Ryerson, it was a lot of these types of little widgets, right? I built an instrument that kind of scanned the body as you moved it and made sound. I built this like generative tool that you could like play a couple of notes and it would like create a number of different harmonic structures out of that. And I was like fiddling a lot with that. But then in my third year, I was like, you know what, this like thing that I'm using on my own, I wonder if like I can combine that with my work at school, like this concept of like, affective music induction or whatever, yes. Right? Like this idea of like, this practice that music therapists will have successfully used for years, but almost kind of digitizing that in some sense of the word, right? Like
right.
Using AI to almost optimize this music curation piece, right?
Yep.
So in my third year, I came up with the concept for the affective music recommendation system, which is LUCID's kind of breakthrough patent, which is designed to use measurement, so biometric measurement, psychometric measurement, and through that curate music in real time based on your current state, your changing state, and then the target, right? Wherever you want to go.
Yeah.
Which at first was just anxiety for me, anxiety reduction. Because like I was on medication at the time, which was handling the psychosis and the mood stabilization and all that other stuff. But I really didn't want to take benzodiazepines for my anxiety.
Right.
I was really hoping to like avoid that. So that was kind of the whole concept, right? I was like, okay, so we have this affective music recommendation system. And then I also came up with this clever way to infuse binaural beats with music. And I had that kind of zeroed in as a patent as well in my head. So
hey, Aaron, can you, for our listening audience, briefly discuss the benefit and like what binaural beats are and what the benefit is?
Yeah, totally.
There will be people listening who's like, what's binaural beats?
No, absolutely. Yeah, fair. So binaural beats is basically a auditory illusion, really, when you're playing two pure sine waves at slightly different frequencies on top of each other. So you basically have, so binaural beats is actually 1 ear. So in the right ear, you have one frequency, left ear, you have another frequency, and they're again at a slightly different frequency. So it's like in the right ear, you'll have 100 hertz, in the left ear, you'll have 104 hertz. And then your brain perceives a third frequency called a beat, which is the 4 hertz frequency, for an example. And each of these beat frequencies have, scientific validation and a lot of research that has gone into this, proving their ability to entrain different mood states. So for an example, theta wave production, so kind of the 4 to 8 hertz range, is really great for anxiety. Like that's one thing that, at least for me personally, it was working well. Then I started to see the literature a lot. They've done a ton of different research around that. So again, kind of back to the cough syrup analogy, it's like it's efficacious. However, giving my grandmother binaural beats to help with her anxiety is just not going to happen, right?
Right.
Like unless you're an audiophile, like you just don't want to experience it.
Yes.
So yeah, kind of piece of IP number one with Lucid, or like when I was at school, again, it was like, if we can make this digestible, right? If we can make this cough syrup taste good, then
there you go.
That could do a lot of good, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, if we can choose the right music at the right time while infusing binaural beats, that's got to help even more, right? Or even like another layer on top of that.
Yes.
So pack us all together, and in my fourth year, I basically created this tent. Like, I don't know if you've seen it, like the dome that like I built. I'll have to send you a link, because it might be something you can take a look at for content. But there was this large geodesic dome, and I called it Lucid. And what the environment did was you wore an EEG reader, and then you entered this big space that was lit up with colorful lights and very soothing kind of environment. We even had smells for a second, like nice. Some incense and everything.
Sure.
And you walked into the space, you lied down on on this very comfortable mat, and basically the EEG reader would assess a meditation level. And based on that meditation level, it would curate a music selection in real time to match where you're at and kind of guide you to a higher meditation level. Nice. Binaural beats were infused with the music. But the cool thing was the interaction was you wore this EEG reader, and without touching anything, the music would change and adapt to you, right?
Wow.
And in that environment, we also had big subwoofers that were like blaring the music, like so that you'd feel it physically. Yes. And good. And then the colors of the dome would change. And this was just in my head. This was my thesis project, and I was using it to apply for a master's degree. That was kind of the goal in mind. I was like, I wanted to continue to do research on this idea. And my thesis advisor told me that it would be the worst idea ever to keep this in academia. And the funny thing was he was an academic, right? So he was just like, Aaron, I think this is something that, you need to look at entrepreneurship for. You need to consider building something so that we could get this to people, right?
Yes.
He's like, I know through, being an academic that if we keep this in academics, it's going to stay in academics for many, many years and maybe eventually get out there. So it's interesting. I actually was kind of pushed into entrepreneurship and that's kind of where the story of the company of Lucid began, right? I found a couple of co-founders. I started at this accelerator at Ryerson with Zoe Thompson and Zach McMahon, who are both my co-founders today. And it's been 4 years and we built a company out of it basically. And Lucid has kind of come to life. So obviously the Dome is the first experience. But today we've been able to kind of transcend that into a mobile product, right? Which is what we'll probably chat a bit about now, but basically taking that whole nucleus of an idea and transcending that into something we can scale out to people. And that's really been the goal over the last couple of years, is getting something that's easy to give out and something we could kind of disseminate.
That's outstanding. I think over the last probably 3 years for me, maybe longer, probably longer, I noticed scaling was on my mind as well as a music therapist, because I found, it started working I was working in oncology and I was being referred for anxiety and pain management. And those were my referring factors. And what I noticed is there was only one of me, and there was only funding for me to be physically in the same space as these patients for a very limited amount of time, but they had access to music 24/7 on their devices.
Okay.
And I realized, I was like, I need to teach these people how to fish.
Yeah.
Like I need to show them how to work with their tablet or their phone on their own to use music and curate music for their own, mood management, because they don't have access to me at 2 a.m. when they can't sleep.
Yeah.
And it became kind of like this quest. And so it started to be just being really interested in app technology that was just starting to, come of age. And what are the different apps that were either relaxation apps or virtual instrument apps,
right?
Where they could on their phone with their earbuds be, drawing a circle, but it's a harp. And so they sound like they're this Juilliard trained harpist, and there are no wrong notes, and they're having this amazing musical experience, successful musical experience, right? Drawing circles on a phone. And some of the most satisfying days in the infusion center would be after I had worked with a patient, gave them some literature on here's how to use music on your own. Here's how to use your smartphone. Here's what to do. I'd come back and I'd see them a week later, and they'd be all tucked up with their blankets and their hat, and I could see their earbuds.
Nice.
Just, that's all I could see. And their eyes were closed, and there was a smile on their face. And I knew that I had made that connection for them with what was available at the time. And then it was like, my work is done here. Get. You know what I mean? Because now they had that relationship with music, and they knew how to reach for it on their own. And so I just love that you were kind of thinking in the same way, like, how do we get this out to where people can be utilizing this wherever they are, whenever they are? That's
just what technology has opened up for us, right? It's like the ability to transcend barriers of geography, right? Like, so, and that's like one thing, like one of the most beautiful things that I've gotten to experience while at Lucid is when we launched Vibe right as the pandemic hit, which was perfect timing in a lot of ways. Vibe, again, for context, is our mobile application.
Let's go. Talk to us about Vibe.
What Vibe does is basically packages that Lucid experience in a mobile format, right? It's a very simple interaction. You tell it how you want to feel. We have 4 options right now. We have calm, focus, sleep, and energize. So energize is kind of this nice feeling of vitality. Sleep is obviously sleep. Calm is to de-escalate stress. And for focus, it's kind of getting you into a flow state, the goal anyway. And what you do is you use this psychometric grid that we've designed with a number of scientists on our board. And that grid basically allows you to tell it how you're feeling. So if you scroll down.
Yep. See this, right because I'm going to throw this up on YouTube. So I want people to see this grid that you're talking about.
So this grid here, you kind of move this white diode around, and based on how you're feeling, you kind of indicate on this 2x2, right? So you have the bubble: tension, fear, sad, calm, energized, and neutral, and then kind of any gradient in between, right? We found that Even this exercise of self-assessment has been kind of therapeutic for some people, which is really lovely.
Nice.
And then on top of that, we have the anxiety meter below, which is kind of the subjective units of discomfort, like how much anxiety are you feeling?
Yeah.
So, you kind of tell it how you're feeling. Prior to that, you tell it where you want to go. And then what Vibe will do is generate a playlist for you in real time of music that we've composed in-house, using a number of different kind of principles around emotion induction. GEMS protocol is one that we use, which is basically a means for kind of rule sets around mood states and music. And basically, what it'll do is it'll curate this music for you in real time, and then at the end and during the experience, you can actually provide emotional updates using that same grid.
Wow.
And what Vibe will do very quickly is it'll learn what musical features are working for you, what aren't, and it will kind of reinforce itself on those success rates. So it might be that you relax more to tense sounding music, right? And that happens. There's a lot of people who are like that, right?
Yeah.
I have a couple of metalhead friends who listen to Metallica to relax, right? It's just
my best friend in high school used to go to bed listening to Ride the Lightning. And I'm like, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, my best friend's like that too. So it's one of those things, right? So that's the nice thing. Vibe really aims itself at learning those behaviors. Obviously, the app is in a very early state and we're still building it out, but that's the concept, right?
Brilliant.
And we released this right as the pandemic was hitting, back in January 2020. And, this whole concept of scale really came to life because when it got really bad in Italy, we had all these Italian people using the app and getting these beautiful, Instagram feeds of like people speaking Italian about our app. We didn't know what they were saying. We're like, hopefully this is good. We're getting translations. We're trying to figure it out. But the idea of this kind of global community really started to spruce up, right?
Wow.
And that's really kind of when the magic hit me. It's like, wow, I'm so glad we're doing digital therapeutics. This is where we need to go with this, right? Because, somebody out in Italy who's experiencing crisis because of COVID was able to use this and experience, a serenity from it. And
totally
the Dome and a lot of our other amazing in-person experiences, obviously they're very powerful. So I'm sure, you have a ton of experience with this. It's interesting to be able to try to almost package up a smaller version of that amazing in-person experience.
Yes.
And get it to more mass, right?
Yes.
Yes.
If I may, an 85%
sure.
experience to 10 times as many people.
Yes.
Where you're not turning your back on your 100% experience to 1x the number of people, but you're yes, and.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. And I remember to this day, some of the best moments at Lucid has been when people left the Dome, sometimes in tears, just in sighs of relief, right? And I'm okay, I just need to get as much of that as possible in the app. You know what I mean? That was kind of the goal. It's let's get obviously we're never gonna mimic what the in-person experience is like, but we can try our best to make
it. How close can we get?
Yeah, exactly. How close can we go, right?
That's cool.
We even started working for a little while with a furniture manufacturer called Steelcase. I'm not sure if you're familiar with who they are, but they're convinced of helping us package that in-person experience, right? So they're we could do a tent, they could ship to people, or maybe a pillow, and
absolutely. If people are buying, because they're buying hyperbaric oxygen tank therapy for their house, they're buying float pods, right? So why not? There's a space in the market for that.
There's got to be at some point, right? At some point we can kind of get to that. But for now, I mean, we're really excited about kind of this digital space, right? So Vibe was our first step, kind of in this consumer wellness category. But what's really exciting is as of November of this past year, 2020, we had our first clinical trial to prove that Lucid was efficacious on anxiety. And this is anxiety with a capital A, diagnosed anxiety, medical environment. We gathered medical data, and Lucid was benchmarked against pink noise and a number of other kind of standard sonic treatments other than music. And then we did a second trial where we compared our music to Spotify's calming music. So kind of generic calming music. And we were able to outperform that as well.
Nice.
So now we're getting into this really interesting space where it's okay, we could do consumer, we could do wellness, we should, because that's where most people are.
Yes.
But we could also look into kind of digital therapeutics in the medical realm as well. And that's something that we started playing with. So we're currently working with a couple of partners in the US to look at burnout in physicians and nurses. So that's kind of one space that we're looking at. We're looking at adolescent anxiety in kind of the school age population. Again, a more prescription-based approach as opposed to kind of the Vibe get it to as many people as possible approach.
Right.
And we even have a partner in Japan we're currently negotiating with around an Alzheimer's product as well,
Wow.
which we're really excited about. And these are, again, all very early conversations, and they're all going to require a ton of medical personnel to like help consult. But I think we're starting to see this really interesting horizon, right, of like, you know, where we can inject this music modality that we've built, which is kind of exciting.
That's super exciting. It's super inspiring to think, like you said, that there's these two directions you can go with consumer wellness, because particularly today, people are embracing emerging technology for consumer wellness, health and wellness, the wearables, like what that tidal wave that's occurred just in the last couple of years with the Aura Ring, you know, kind of like suddenly everybody's got an Aura Ring, and it's like, oh, I've got mine too. And the Fitbit before that, you know, it's like people are really trusting technology to give them real-time data and to be able to interact. But what I love, what you're creating is something that is not just reactive to the body, but then leads the body.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Totally.
You know, and totally. I remember consulting with another company that shall remain nameless that was looking at a product, create a wearable product. And I said to them, I said, what you really want is you want a product where the music leads the person. First it reads where the person is and then can lead them out, and isn't just a feedback loop of where they are. And they just sat there like, what? You know, it was like a whole, they'd never even thought like at that level. And you did.
Yeah. I mean, like, so that was, I remember when I was first starting out, there was so many biofeedback plays at the time. And, every investor was like, you guys are biofeedback. I'm like, no, it's not biofeedback.
No.
Like, it's like, you know, and like we had to come up with these analogies, right? It was like biofeedback, it's almost like a personal trainer. It tells you where you are, but like you still have to force yourself to kind of go the extra mile to train yourself, whatever practice you're trying to train.
There you go.
What we are is a massage therapist for your brain. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, we're just trying to like, you know, kind of make an analogy that made sense to people, right?
Yes,
it's like it's passive listening. It's passive listening. We do require like biometrics to drive that passive process, but you're not supposed to do any work. You just need to listen to the music, right? Like that's kind of the difference there.
Yep.
And eventually people got it, right? But like it took a lot of investment conversations for us to just be like, listen, like this is a little different than what you've looked at. But I think that's really special, and here's why, right?
Let me ask you this question, because people's music preference around genre is so much like flavor, right? It's like, it's so personal and it's so subjective. And what we know in the music therapy literature is that, you know, what we joke, patient preferred is prescribed, right? You know, and so tell me about how you go about curating and from that perspective, from that thought.
Totally. Yeah. So, I mean, we have just started kind of really diving into that. I think the first step for us was kind of, let's create a body of music that will appeal to as many people as possible, just to get ourselves started, right? Just because of, you know, human hours really is all that we could really work on.
Sure.
Now that we're getting funding, we're really expanding that palette out. And what we're planning on doing is actually, we have a couple of features up our sleeve that are going to make it a little bit more intuitive to really figure this out. But what we have right now is in the app, we have a questionnaire. Which is kind of the short test of music preferences to figure out, you know, what their preferences are. If they opt in to create this profile, then they'll get a more catered experience to that data. Cool. Again, this is kind of all just at the speed of which we can compose content. So we're really just trying to kind of churn that content out before we roll it out. But we're even working on some features now where you basically, you know, listen to music and we can kind of look at your reactions and almost detect a lot of these different preferential things too.
Yeah. So I want to pull that up again here, because I was looking at that on your website and it blew my little tiny brain apart, and I'm trying to figure out where it was. This isn't where it was. Wait, no, this isn't it. Your website, by the way, is gorgeous. I have to say, yeah, it's really good, but it was the Biomir.
Yeah.
Biomir. Yeah. So if I go to home, is it under music services?
Go to music services.
That's where it was. Wait, here we go. Here it is.
Yeah.
So guys, I'm going to scroll down, because what it shows is there's some great clips of how you guys and I want to ask you about this remixing audio. But this video right here, I want you to explain to people what we're looking at with this.
Totally.
This is extraordinary. And I'm going to, I'm going to unmute it, and I think I shared sound. So what we're looking at here, as people are watching the music, there's two things that are moving on here. One is in the brain activation window, and one is in the energy positivity level window.
Sorry, I can't actually see. I can't see anything on my screen. Just
oh no, did I not share it? Okay, hold please. Oh, I didn't. Problem. I got all excited and then I didn't share it. So
Yeah, I can definitely watch. I think I know what video you're talking about.
Thank you for stopping.
Oh, of course.
Because I was on a rant. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm familiar with this. Yeah. So this is actually a really interesting project that we worked on with an artist named Rosie Chan out of London, UK. She's a contemporary classical pianist.
Okay.
Gorgeous musician, amazing player. And she was really interested in the concept of remixing her content to be optimized for emotional states. So nice. One of the things that we have afforded in our product is the ability to kind of correlate musical features with human response data. So biometrics, psychometrics, et cetera. And what that has allowed us to do is train models that can help predict what musical features are likely to induce certain states, depending on where a user might be in their emotional journey at that point in time. So it's opened up some interesting ideas, right? The idea of like, can we optimize music for emotions? So like Rosie is like, if I wanted a song to be more peaceful, could you help me with that, right? So we're like, there's no reason why we couldn't try. And what we basically did is built these models that basically helped us figure out what musical feature combinations are not helping in a piece of music, for an example, like what areas are kind of detracting from that emotional state and what areas are helping with it. And what it has allowed us to do is kind of work with artists to recreate their music and almost like a new light, right? And with the idea of emotion induction as kind of the primary goal, right?
This is fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, it's a really interesting concept. I mean, we're using a lot of these tools internally to create music, right? It's like right now, instead of having a brief that's like, here's the aesthetic you want to reach, it's like, here's the emotion that we're trying to reach with this one. It's like, we need more music in this category. So, we'll be like, Andrew, who's our composer, here are the musical features you need to avoid. Here's the ones that you should work, dive into or lean into rather. And that's kind of how we'll kickstart the process. And we'll also do these things called affective remixes, right? Which is the idea of like, let's take stuff that's already existing and let's change it in order to have a different emotional state. So we've even tried things that are like tense sounding music, trying to make it sound peaceful. Going from like a polar opposite. And it's surprisingly effective. And that's something that we're playing around with right now is like, could we scale this out and purely for our internal, like, content creation processes. I think we've been experimenting with working with partners around this as well. But I think like the main driver is like, we need more content. We need more intelligent content. Let's build some internal tools to do that.
So for example, can you see, I have the clips up, right? So let's let the listeners listen to clip one.
Yeah.
And what we'll do is we'll play clip one and then we'll play clip two. And then you can after we finish clip two, you can kind of talk about what happened there. And here's clip two. I'm already like in my mind's eye, this video with Rosie Chan, with this graphics with like, I'm already seeing in my mind's eye, like how the ball would be moving just immediately.
Down to the right. Yeah. So what's interesting. So this one exact, like in particular, was a really interesting experiment because those are two very opposite ends of the spectrum, right? And like it was a challenge like that we wanted to put in front of ourselves. And what we did was basically the first clip that you heard, we have this kind of tense sounding, almost like powerful driving piece of music, right?
Yeah.
We use it in our Vitality library. It's also useful to bring someone from a state of tension. It's a kind of a nice, like nice
uplifting.
Kind of, yeah. That one, we were like, let's make that peaceful. Let's turn that into a peacefulness track. It's like, okay. Our composer's like, you're crazy. It's like, well, I mean, let's give it a shot. Right. So our algorithms, combed through the track, basically told us for each stem, here are the conflicting features with that stem. With that information, we basically like, okay, you know what? We need to remove a couple things. We need to maybe add a new, like a replacement melody. So we took that lead guitar line and replaced it with a nice warm sounding clarinet, I think is what we ended up using.
Okay.
Removed a ton of stems that were like causing conflict in terms of percussion.
So
like heavy
for the non-producer or particularly remixer, what is a stem?
Sorry, yeah. Stem is basically a layer. So you can think about like a recording, we have multiple layers in the recording. You'll have a voice track, you'll have a drum track, you'll have a guitar track, a bass track, etc.
There you go.
In the first track that you heard, or the first clip, we had like a very dense sounding mix. I think there was maybe 30 or 32 like layers to it.
Wow.
And then in the second one, it was much thinner, right? We removed a bunch of stuff. We changed a lot of the features and the ones that were helpful, like the layers that were helpful. So we added some equalization, we rounded things out a little bit, and then we replaced the lead guitar melody with a woodwind, and which I think we used a clarinet. And basically, what that ended up with is a mix that both tested well in kind of this like algorithmic environment where we had this model like letting us know like, hey, you did it. But also when you listen to it, it's just completely different, and you feel like that level of peacefulness through it, right?
100%.
Which is really cool. And then the nice thing is like, obviously there's a lot of musicians' intuition in there, but it's mainly the data that we've been able to collect, which is, it's kind of reassuring that at least we're kind of going in that direction.
So let me back up and try to summarize this in English in layman's terms. The original, that's okay. No, it's great. Because I'm following you, but I'm fellow nerd down the rabbit hole. So I want to kind of bring it up to the surface. So this first track was something that was written by, somebody, and they wrote out a bunch of different instrument lines for it. Like you said, like 30. And then you took that piece of music and you put it through this remix engine.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I'm going to say this in English, like the computer listened to the original track and thought, based on the rules that you guys set up, what your intention is, it looked at it and went, this wouldn't work if we want to be more mellow. This wouldn't work. We need to do this. And the engine itself, like the computer, the program actually recommended the changes and then did the changes itself as well, or just spit out a bunch of recommendations that you manually changed?
In this, we have kind of the MVP engine spits out recommendations, right? So it's mostly, it's basically like instructions. It's like, do it this way and it'll work.
Like
we now have
like my Yoast SEO plugin on my WordPress.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, human, do it this way, please. Right. But I think now we actually have a model that will do some of the work. So it automates some of the acoustic changes, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
So like equalization and compression is something that we've been able to automate, which is kind of fun. But right now there's still, an audio engineer at the end who still needs to kind of do the majority of the lifting.
Got it.
I mean, my goal is by, the next couple of years, if I do my job right, we'll automate that process entirely. Right.
Amazing.
Like at least to a certain degree where it's almost just like quality control at that point. Right. Because I think the one theory we have is like there's so much content that's been created that we can just, optimize for, right? We can just, get more out of, as opposed to like, as opposed to having to recreate a bunch of music. Like, for an example, at Lucid, we have around 200 tracks right now. In my head, I'm like, there's no reason we can't 10x that library with just remixes and slight changes for and eventually, the one dream that I have is like each person gets their own remix in real time with Lucid, right? Like you're getting a derivative work being created for you as you need it, right?
As you need it.
And it's like that song just has never been created, and it'll just keep iterating, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of like generative music from the ground up. I really like this idea of like human machine collaboration. That's kind of one thing that Lucid has been really focused on. Like a lot of our competition has gone the generative music route. Like let's just replace human musicians completely. In my head, I'm like, if we're really trying to heal people, I think there needs to be a human essence to it. Like that's just kind of my theory. It's like if there's no human essence in the music, like it no longer feels as enriching or as healing as it could be, right? I think like generative music is great in terms of some concept of like we'll save money, we'll have more content, etc. It's a numbers thing though. To me, it's like this doesn't feel real. This doesn't feel healing. So yeah, when a lot of my competition was kind of going into this idea of like let's just create algorithms who create music, we were like we're gonna have humans create the music, but we're gonna have algorithms help the humans make better music.
Nice.
And at first that just sounded expensive to investors, right? But hey, I mean, it's worked out. I think a lot of our success is attributed to the music that just sounds so rich, right? And I think that's because we have amazing human composers, at the helm. So I think that's one thing that I'm going to stay true to. I'm a huge techie and I'm a huge AI person, but I think there's certain things that humans just do really well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think the emotional resonance. Yeah. One of the things that we talk about in music therapy is with humans connecting to other humans, and the music that those other humans created is the bridge of connection, but what they're connecting to is the other human. Yeah. So it's, what did you connect with? And well, I connected with their sadness. Yeah. I connected with their passion. I connected with their excitement. And what they're talking about is they're talking about the artist behind the music. That's the human to human connection that music provides.
And like the best composers just feel so much of the emotion. You know what I mean? Yeah. You could tell, like you can just hear that. And that's such a powerful thing that an algorithm is going to take. It's going to take a lot of huge advancements in technology for algorithms to feel. You know what I mean? Like to actually feel like the wrath of the emotions. And like, it's like, that's just something that it just isn't there. Right. Yeah. And I think that, so that's like, I think, algorithms have a lot to offer in the process of optimizing for healing with music. But I definitely think that, at the end of the day, there's going to be a human at the keyboard, in a lot of ways.
Love it. Amazing. So inspiring where you were, what you went through, what you decided to do, and how far you've come in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, that's a massive transformation. You're welcome. And so just on the level of personal transformation, giant high five. And then on the realm of like, and now what can I do for others? And I think that's part of what the drive is, right? It's like not just for me, but like a mission that's bigger than me, a mission that's bigger than, us, you or me, right? Like, and then that outward thinking, like thinking about others and their suffering, like our next conference that you'll be speaking at, it's specifically for healthcare professionals. And I think about nurses and I think about doctors who I used to work with in the inpatient settings and how stressful it was before COVID. Yeah. And then the silent battles that they fought over the last 14 months that people have no idea. I've been interviewing, them for the last few months, kind of trying to get language for what it was like. It's unlike anything we've ever experienced. And this because you did a subreddit. What was the AMA? Can you tell the story about the AMA? Because you got so much validation about, holy cow, this is a tidal wave. And I would love for you to just share with because that's really a beautiful, beautiful story.
Oh yeah. I mean, the AMA was very unexpected. So I'm a huge tech person, but I'm like a grandfather when it comes to social media. Like I'm very disconnected, unfortunately. Luckily, like we pay money for content, like amazing content people at Lucid. Like they're just incredible. Like Carol is like a superhero in my eyes, but like I just can't do it. It just does not work for me. So
know thyself.
She approached me and she's like, hey, like I really think we should do this thing called an AMA. And I was like, okay, what is it? And she's like, well, you go on, you present like a concept and you allow people to ask you anything, right? You just open yourself up to the world. And I was like, oh, this sounds like fun. Like I'm very comfortable with my mental health story. I'm very happy to share it. I think like discourse is the way that we can kind of make progress, right? If we all share our personal stories, we can move on and start fixing things, right? So I was like, yeah, like, you know what, I'll go deep. I'll go right to the source, like right at the nucleus, right? And I was like, and the AMA was like, hey, I'm bipolar 1, you know what I mean? I went from being psychiatrized to running a startup and kind of growing a tech company to 12 employees or whatever. There was like some statement of like, this is where I went from, and here's where I went to. And the whole concept was basically to like in your face anybody who is like, hey, you're bipolar, you should just cope with your existence. And, you know, you don't have to dream anymore. You don't have to aspire anymore. And I, you know, in my head, I was like, you know what, like, I'm sure there'll be some nice heartwarming conversation, and I'm excited. We'll see what happens. Well, it trended, as they say, in a pretty significant way. Like we ended up at the height of it, we had 3 of our team members, including myself, answering questions as me because there was just so much activity.
Wow.
And it just blew up.
Wow.
Right. And the beautiful thing, it was all people who identified with a lot of mental health challenges, and like, and the theme was very consistent. Everybody keeps saying, I can't do this anymore. I can't, or you know what I mean? Like that just damaging discourse of like, you need to cope with what you have and you can't go beyond that.
Right.
And it was such an inspiring moment for me. And like, it seemed like everybody that, you know, was experiencing this kind of conversation. And, yeah, it was honestly probably, again, there's a couple of moments at Lucid where I was like, this is surreal and incredible. And like, I just want to cherish this moment.
Yes.
That was one of them. And I again, had no idea the ramifications of what an AMA was or how big they were. And yeah, I mean, it was huge. It was huge. And then even like Reddit admins were like checking in with us like, hey, hope everything's going okay. And there's not too many trolls or anything. It was just like, no, we're good. It's just like overwhelmed. But it was awesome. Yeah, it was really great. And I think, I think that's something that I'm hoping over the years we can kind of crush, right? Is that negative discourse, that like this kind of cookie cutter medical model, right? Like, which I think is really hard to do with mental health, right? It's hard to kind of put people in a bucket because, you know, so much of mental health is experience, is life experience, is personality. It's, you know what I mean? There's just like so many complicated things that bundle there. So I think like outside of bringing, you know, music to the world in a healing capacity, I want to bring that, right? Like this, like disrupting the concept of what we see as mental health or mental health as we know it.
I love it. What I want to just point out is your commitment to using technology to enhance a person-to-person or human-to-human experience by using musicians, not AI, to create music. You did that very same thing with the Ask Me Anything on Reddit. You used technology to create a human-to-human connection, and you leveraged technology that you're not even that savvy with, frankly. And it was your team that kind of brought the opportunity, but it was the human-to-human connection that made the fire, you know, light. And so I think that's a great validation that your personal philosophy on why this matters to be more expensive in the creation of music. Why it matters is that at the end of the day, humans are pack animals. We are wired to connect with each other. We need each other. We live in groups from cradle to grave. We are not designed to do this on our own. So anything we can do to facilitate that connection is helpful and healing.
So much of mental health is alienation and feeling alone, right? Yeah, so like this 100%. Idea of like feeling life through something is important, right? And people know when an algorithm's creating music, like you just don't feel that life, right? Like it's very intangible. It's very hard to like pinpoint. And you know, I'm definitely an engineer and scientist type of person when it comes to my work, but like that, there's some intangibles in music that you just can't explain, right?
That's it.
And you know when it's created by a person, right?
Yeah.
And that's just something, and that person-to-person connection, like you said, is such an important thing in mental health and healing.
100%. 100%. So Aaron, this has just been a phenomenal journey. Thank you so much for taking my listeners through your personal story and what you've done with it. I'm sure they're going to be very excited to go check this out. Where should they all go online? What's the first place they want to go? Yeah.
So again, thanks so much for having me. It's been delightful. I very much enjoyed this. If you want to hear more about Lucid or just kind of check us out, you can go to thelucidproject.ca. Or you could follow us on Instagram, what I have been told to share. So you just go to Instagram, and our handle is the Lucid Universe. And I would say that's kind of where a lot more of our story is put on. But the lucidproject.ca is where you can get like the real information around like what Lucid is and how it can help you.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Aaron.
Thank you, Tim.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I've got a couple of resources for you, which you can find in the show notes or you can listen to right here. So check it out. If you enjoy the sound of my voice and you enjoy the sound of my guitar, imagine them put together. Go to sonicrecovery.com and take your very own relaxation vacation, where I take you out of the stress of the present moment and back in time to a time when you felt happy, healthy, safe, and sober, and then walk you through that memory so you can bring back those feelings into the challenges you're facing today. So go check that out. It's at sonicrecovery.com. If you're a healthcare worker in recovery, check out the Music in Recovery Self-Care Guide for healthcare professionals that I created just for you. That's at hcp.sonicrecovery.com. And if you're a healthcare worker and you'd like more information about how to help your patients use music, you can check out the Music Medicine Guide that I created just for you at musicmedicineguide.com. Lastly, if you enjoyed the pod and you haven't done it yet, would you just take a minute to rate and review it? It really only takes about 60 seconds, believe it or not, and it would go a long way to help us make more people know just how good this pod is, particularly for healthcare workers and their stress. Thanks again. See you next time.